This is a series of videos on communication. In the first video, I'm going to talk about the Merrill Reid model, and the subsequent videos deep dive into each communication preference: driver, expressive, amiable, and analytical. But in this one, we're just quickly going to discuss how the Merrill Reid model works. And I'm going to start in an unexpected way. Now, let's say that I invite you to my place for dinner. Personally, I really love Belgian waffles. So it is quite likely that I'm going to serve Belgian waffles with whipped cream and fruit. And maybe you think this is the best dessert ever. But I can imagine that some of you will think otherwise. So if I invite you and I force you to eat my dessert, what are you going to do? You are polite, so you'll probably say, "Oh, delicious, really amazing waffles. Thank you, Irmina." But maybe deep down you will be thinking, why not a cheese platter? Or why not ice cream? And this is what we do in communication as well. We think that our preferences is something that other people will enjoy as well. But if you really want to build a relationship, you are going to respect the preference. So if I really want to build a relationship with you, I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite dessert? Or what do you like to eat after dinner? And then I'm going to serve you specifically what you've told me. And it's the same thing with communication. First, you need to know what preference does the other person have, and then you need to adapt to it. So how do I recognize these communication preferences? The first thing to think about is the person more on the tell side of the spectrum or more on the ask side of the spectrum? If someone is more on the tell side of the spectrum, usually during a meeting or a conversation, they will take quite a lot of space. They will be very vocal about what they think or how they feel. They will be quite eager to speak up. Usually they speak louder and faster than people from the ask side of the spectrum. So what about the ask side of the spectrum? How do you recognize this preference? Usually people who are on the ask side of the spectrum will keep a low profile during a meeting or a conversation. They'll listen, observe, and when it's their time to speak, they very often ask a question to make sure that they understood what you are talking about. They prefer to know what everybody else thinks and how they feel, and they are rather reluctant to share how they think and how they feel. So this is the first aspect: tell or ask. The second thing to notice is whether the person is on task or emotion side of the spectrum. If someone is on the task side of the spectrum, when they start a conversation or when they walk into the meeting, they always have an agenda and they want to achieve all the points on the agenda. If they don't, they probably will say, "Oh, this was such a waste of time," or "This wasn't a very good meeting," or "It wasn't a very helpful meeting." But if they do, now then they feel satisfied. Someone on the emotion side of the spectrum, they also have an agenda. But when they walk into the meeting or a conversation, they read the room, they see how the other person feels, and they adapt their agenda according to it. So as long as when we finish the conversation or a meeting, we feel that we understood each other, we've connected, then it was still a good meeting, even though I did not achieve everything I've planned. But because we have those two different aspects, then we get 4 distinct communication preferences. If someone is task and tell, their communication preference is driver. If someone is tell and emotion, then we would categorize this preference as expressive. Emotion and ask, amiable. And then task and ask, we have analytical. I can imagine you are now curious about your own communication preference. I mean, you probably have an idea, but if you would like to have your communication profile, you can also reach out to me. With that, you know how the Merrill Reid model works, and in the next videos, we're going to deep dive into each communication preference.